Welcome back to Republican Women Fighting to Take Back America, the podcast of the National Federation of Republican Women. I'm your host, NFRW President Martha Jenkins. Today we're joined by Amanda Makki, an accomplished attorney, advocate for our veterans, and a nationally recognized political and legal commentator. Amanda began her career at the Pentagon in the Army General Counsel's office just weeks after the attacks of 9/11. She later spent nearly a decade on Capitol Hill as a lawyer advancing policies for veterans and military families. And as a VA accredited attorney, she's helped countless veterans secure the benefits they earned, particularly those facing post 9/11 realities like PTSD and suicide. You've also seen Amanda breaking down major developments across global networks, including Fox News, BBC, Newsmax, Al Arabia, News Nation, and Sky News. And today she's here to help us make sense of a rapidly evolving situation, the current attacks involving Iran, what she's hearing through communications on the ground, and the questions so many are asking: will the Islamic regime cling to power, or could the Iranian people finally take back control of their government?
She's fighting to take back America. It's time to take a stand. She's fighting to take back America. Let your voice be heard. She's fighting to take back America. Make her proud again. Oh, the movement has already begun.
Amanda, thank you so much for joining us today. So tell our audience your connections with Iran.
Thank you, Martha, so much for having me. I am grateful really for this opportunity because it is a moment of joy for Iranians all across the diaspora in the United States, in Europe, and elsewhere, people who fled, like me and my family, in 1979. So for 47 years, this oppressive, brutal regime has destroyed lives, destroyed a country abundant with natural resources, and just in the last month alone, killed over 30,000 people simply because they chose to use their voice to protest against a government that is oppressive, dictatorial, and ruthless. They are barbarians, and that is why President Trump is taking them out. My story in connection to Iran is that I was born in Iran. I was an infant when we immigrated. I was just under a year old when we came to the United States, and my family and I fled. My father was a surgeon in Iran, and he was also very politically active against the Ayatollah coming into power. He was very pro-Shah. And because of that, he knew that his life was in danger. So at the young age of 27, he fled with his family. Me, my mother, and my father came to the United States. We sought political asylum. And when that happened, my father looked for a better life in the United States. And I'm proud to say that exactly 6 years to the day that we stepped foot in the United States, my father was able to get his education, because his education in Iran didn't matter that he was a surgeon there, but he became a surgeon here, graduating from Georgetown University Medical Center 6 years, almost to the day that we stepped foot in the United States. And he is a surgeon today, and he has been practicing since 1985. And he is a patriot, and he loves America, and he is so grateful for the opportunities that what this country gave me and my family. And when we see what President Trump is doing, we're so grateful and so honored that he would see Iran, see the people of Iran different from this brutal regime, and want to take out this regime so that the Iranian people no longer live as oppressed people, and they can finally have freedom like every person in the world should have.
Thank you for that story, Amanda. That's incredible. And obviously, your father is a fine, accomplished person, and we're proud to have him and all of your family in America now as Americans. So you mentioned President Trump, and we've heard in the past couple of days the recitation of all the things that this Iranian regime has done, even to Americans, and that no president did anything to push back or punch back until President Trump has. And so, as Americans, we are also thankful for what President Trump is doing. So, do you still have family connections in Iran? And if so, what are you hearing from your acquaintances and friends and family on the ground firsthand?
Well, unfortunately, we haven't been able to contact family members. I spoke with my father yesterday, and we were trying to reach our family on Saturday and Sunday, and we haven't been able to. A lot of that is a function of the government shutting down the ability to communicate. That's another way they silence and suppress people. So we're not worried, but we do want to know their well-being. I do have family there. I still have cousins, some that are younger than me, and some who really, when I was born, the revolution happened. January 15th, 1979 is when the Shah was exiled from Iran. And February 1st, 1979 is when the Ayatollah took power. So many of my cousins who are a little bit younger than me, they've only lived under this oppressive regime, and this is all they know. And for 40 years, they've been suppressed. And so this is what, in essence, happened, is that these people took to the streets and they protest. But this wasn't the first protest. They've been protesting for years since, really, if we think about what happened in the late 90s and then again in the 2010s, President Obama had an opportunity during that green uprising to help the people of Iran, and he didn't. And so many presidents before him didn't, and presidents after him didn't. The only president who has taken an oversized role in making sure that he can do whatever he can to initiate this in Iran, even to take first steps, has been President Trump. And that's why the people have reacted with naming streets after President Trump. They've just taken street signs and put Trump on it in the streets of Tehran. And they are hopeful that President Trump, as he said in January, would stick to his word about making sure that the Iranian people are no longer suppressed and that they are not simply executed for expressing their opinions. And so, unfortunately, we haven't been able to be in contact with our loved ones there, but we know that they are doing extraordinary things, and this president is listening, and he is acting on that. And the Iranian people are so very grateful. The only ones that aren't are the ones that are aligned with the tyrants that are currently holding power in Iran.
Well, we know that there are millions and millions of people in Iran that obviously a certain percentage of them have been part of this regime and have benefited from this regime. We also know that Israel took out the top echelon of their command and control, not just their infrastructure, but their leadership. So President Trump today said that this could be a 4 or 5 week campaign potentially. Based on what you are hearing, how much of Iran's capabilities have already been destroyed, and what do we still need to be concerned about?
Well, I think the biggest concern is really the leadership. So unlike other countries, you can look at Venezuela, for example. Iran has a very sophisticated form of government that is both religious clerics as well as military. And so they have a command structure that is always ready to fall into its next successor. So in other words, it's not like a Venezuela where we're saying, well, who's going to be the next person that's going to take over and what happened? Iran is a very, sophisticated country that has been involved with the Houthis and with Hamas, and they have, sleeper cells. This is a country that has Hezbollah and other groups that they have financed for decades. And so they're in a little bit of a different situation, making it more difficult for what we are trying to do here in the United States to eradicate this government, because they have the next in lines. And so that is going to be a little bit of a troubling thing, where I think a lot of people are saying, well, we did it in Venezuela, we can do it in Iran. Not exactly the same thing. And again, you have a leadership structure and a command and control structure that's based on both religion. So they have one silo of religion, and then they have one silo of leaders in the military. And so it is going to be a little bit different. Also, Tehran is a very densely populated city. And so to mitigate or minimize the destruction and human destruction, it is very hard to hit without affecting and potentially massacring people. And so that's certainly weighing heavily on President Trump's mind, but also boots on the ground. Allowing for the United States to send troops there is something that I think we're going to have a lot of pushback on, whether it be through Congress or just the American people resonating their voices. And so this is going to be very tenuous. This is not a yay, okay, everything's done, and, Iran's free. They are not free yet, and their leadership continues to be, remaining in power. So a lot more has to happen, and 4 to 6 weeks may be a short.
Well, obviously, speaking as an American, we hope that it won't take that long, but we certainly don't want to risk the chances of them regaining all of the weapons they have had. And the conventional weapons have been underestimated, I think, by most in the public. They've been concentrating on not allowing them to get a nuclear weapon. But as it was pointed out, I believe today, by Secretary Hegseth, that their conventional weapons were allowing them to hide what they were doing with nuclear weapons, because they were building up the conventional weapons as well, and they were using them. Which brings me to the next thing. How much of a mistake do you think it is that the Iranians were hitting back on the regimes, not just in Israel, but in the other Middle Eastern country? Not just our Navy and planes, but countries like Bahrain and Saudi Arabia and Qatar. Do you think that was a big mistake on their part? What do you think is going to happen with that?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly is devastating to hear, because that emerges a view for people of, wow, we're going into World War III. Look at all these countries that are now involved. What are the European countries now going to do? Whose side are they going to take? And so I think they tried to do what any country would do in a desperate situation, as Iran definitely is. I think they're just trying to do whatever they can, create as much repercussion as they can, to either bring people to the table, make it so that the population of people in America says, oh my gosh, we've got to stop. This has now gone too far. We thought this was going to be a one and done, like Maduro, for example, because everyone keeps referencing Venezuela right now. So I do think it's important that we keep in mind that this may be a negotiation tactic that Iran may want to use, but certainly, going after those countries that, yes, they've been part of peace plans with President Trump, but, largely this is something that I don't think we could have forecast, that they would have then started attacking these countries that are typically aligned, OPEC countries, with Iran. So I do agree that this was something that maybe took people aback by what happened, but this may be all part of a negotiation tactic by Iran to get people to the table to get this to stop, because I think they know that while they may have a short or a few victories here and there, those are just battles. Those aren't the war.
Well, that's definitely something that the region, the Middle Eastern region, has always looked at, the big picture and the long game, more so than Americans, who now seem to have an attention span shorter than 5 minutes. But let me go on into another direction. What do you think are the chances that the Iranian people can indeed take back their country and take control of the government?
Well, I always said that it has to really happen from a regime change, and only the United States could be involved with something as drastic as that to help liberate the people of Iran. But I've heard the Shah's son, who we've all seen on the different networks, talking about how he would go in, he would step in and at least provide an interim leader until a leader can be decided. Certainly, he doesn't want to portray himself as a de facto leader because he hasn't been to that country in at least 48 years. But what I would say is that when he has spoken, he has said the government workers there get paid $200 a month to live. If you can pay them and secure them from going to work, that country can collapse on its own without necessarily having boots on the ground. And so I think it's really important to think of ways where we don't have to lose our treasures, our members of the armed services. We don't want to put troops down in Iran. We don't want that. So how do we go about that? How do we crumble the infrastructure from within? Because you're seeing what happened 47 years ago basically reemerge again. The footage that was happening 47 years ago is not dissimilar from what you're seeing now. And that was a revolution. And that took a country from a king and a queen, a monarchy, to a theocracy, to a religious leadership. Now, how did that happen? It happened with the help of the United States. And President Carter was president at the time. And a lot of people look back at what happened kind of those 2 years before, I'd say 1.5 years before the Shah was exiled and the Ayatollah was brought into power. Jimmy Carter spent January 1st, 1978, New Year's in Iran, a year before everything went down. And he called the Shah a beacon of hope in an area of uncertainty. And so when you look at what Jimmy Carter put in place because of his own presidential reelection and his own ambitions, to your point, our foreign policy has really been all over the map. And we have not focused on foreign policy the way that we should, because if we did, we would not have let what happened in Iran happen. And for 47 years, having a religious dictator in there thinking we have someone we can control, the Ayatollah couldn't be controlled. And that's why we are here today. And that's why we've had 47 years of turmoil in that part of the world, because Iran has been sponsoring these terrorist organizations like Hamas and the Houthi rebels. And so it's really important that we get this foreign policy right. And what is important for the United States is that Iran does not continue to be a tinderbox. And you have these people who are willing to give their lives. For 40 plus years, they've been suppressed so badly that they don't care. They think it's better to take to the streets. And if they get killed, they get killed fighting for freedom in Iran. And that's what President Trump needs to focus on and remain focused on.
Thank you for telling us those things. I wonder how surprised the Ayatollah, even though he didn't have much time to be surprised, I wonder how surprised he was when he realized that he was going to meet the 7 virgins, because he never thought that Trump meant what he said. No other president had done anything to stop him. So why would this one? So I'm sure that the whole regime is just kind of shaking their heads and thinking, we didn't think this would ever happen. So Amanda, as we wrap up, is there any other insight that you might have to share with us that maybe we're not hearing or seeing on the news media that's pertinent to what is going on in Iran right now?
Yeah, I posted on my Facebook post this morning, and you can find me on Twitter at Amanda Makki, Instagram at Amanda Makki, and Facebook the same. But I posted an article that it basically talks about it's an interview with a prisoner of these protests in 2022, and he talks about the things that happened in these prisons and how vicious these people are, who run this country. And they're these people who are running the prisons. They're workers. They're doing what they're told. But it's a really interesting story. A compilation of stories of people and the experiences that they've had in prison only because they dared to express their voices. And just to understand how oppressed the people of Iran are, and why the president is doing this, because people are going to second guess and they're going to say, why are we involved in this? Another war in the Middle East. And, you have to understand what is happening there right now to truly understand why President Trump has taken this drastic measure. And so I encourage everyone to, read this article and really understand how vicious and barbaric these people are. But one thing that I talk about, and I've had the honor of speaking to various National Federation of Republican Women's groups and give speeches at various meetings. In fact, I was supposed to be in your state, your home state last month, but unfortunately the snowstorm postponed that. So I'll be there in August to speak at your next meeting for the statewide National Federation of Republican women in North Carolina. But one of the things that I talk about when I give those speeches is about the failed leadership and what failed leadership does in these countries, what happens in these countries. And when you look at a country like Venezuela and you look at a country like Iran, these are probably in their hemispheres, among the wealthiest nations that ever existed in their respective hemispheres. And look where they are now. Corruption, failed leadership, leaders who believed in socialism more than they believed in capitalism and allowing people to be successful in their own form of democracy, sham democracies. And when I talk about these countries, I always bring in the country of Poland and show how these two countries that had everything, that had abundance of wealth and natural resources, and then a country like Poland that was completely obliterated by the Nazis, almost decimated. It was a country without its own country for 123 years. And look where they are now. They are a rising economy. They are beating out Japan and other countries in Europe, first world countries in Europe, in many metrics because of solid conservative leadership. And I think it's really important that we talk about these things so future generations understand just how important it is to be active in politics, to be active in promoting these thoughts and ideals. It can't just be us old ladies. It has to be the younger generation too that understands the importance of this and pushes and educates their own peers. And so just happy to talk about that. If ever a group needs or wants people who can talk about these regimes and talk about what they've done, I'd be happy to do that. But it is really important that we focused on what history has taught us and what we've learned from the present. And again, I use Venezuela and Iran as what these countries had, and look where they are now, and a country like Poland, and look how crushed they were, and look where they are, and look where Poland is now.
You've made some great points, Amanda, and we appreciate having you so much today on our podcast. I know our listeners enjoyed hearing about everything that you know about Iran. If you're watching this podcast and you are not a member of NFRW, please go to nfrw.org or email membership@nfrw.org. Also, please like, share, and subscribe to the Republican Women Fighting to Take Back America podcast on YouTube, Rumble, and Spotify. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, X, True Social, and TikTok.